Welcome to Equip with Pastor Steve Hamner. Join us today as we are creating a world that Christ can live in. For more information, visit our website at wordoffaithtuscaloosa.com.
Hello, welcome to Equip. My name is Pastor Steve Hamner. Let's get into the Word of God today. Last time we talked, we spoke along the lines of if you want to have a better life, that you have to see a better life. And that oftentimes we look at life through a flawed vision. Today we want to look at perspective. We're going to look at life through the eyes of God and see how our perspective is different from God's perspective. God sees what we cannot see. God has a view of what is going on. And therefore God knows and God understands that He has all things in control. Our understanding of life, though, and its challenges has to do with our perspective and how we view them or how we see them. One more time, I want to say that our understanding of life and its challenges has to do with how we view them and our perspective on them. So let's define what is perspective. Perspective is an understanding of something because you see things from a larger frame of view or from a larger reference. Also, the definition for perspective, it is the ability to perceive how things are interrelated or how things correspond or how things are parallel to each other and then judge their comparative importance. So looking at things and how they connect, how they parallel each other, and then seeing how they join themselves together. Now, spiritually, perspective means seeing life from God's point of view. Seeing life from God's point of view. So if I have God's perspective, I can see life, and life has more meaning, life has more purpose when I see it through the eyes of God. But if I'm seeing life through my eyes, I see problems, I see hardships, I see difficulties, I see sickness. And when I look at life through those eyes, I don't see an answer. I don't see a solution. I only see problems, and there's no way to deal with those problems. But when I look at life through God's perspective and through God's eyes, I see a solution to what I'm going through. And so spiritually, I want to be able, and you should want to also be able to view life from God's point of view, because He's sitting up high. And He's overlooking everything, and His perspective on things are way more important. I'm reminded of one of the old prophets in the Old Testament, how it says that God took him out and told him to look out and to survey and see. There's something about perspective. You can get on top of a mountain and you can overlook things, and your perspective is better on top than it is down in the valley and among everybody else. According to Psalms 103, verse number 7, it says this about God, that God made known His ways to Moses, but His acts He made known to the children of Israel. In other words, what happened was the people got to see what Moses did, but Moses got to understand why God did what He did. And this was obtained through relationship. And a lot of times, see, we as humans, we want to know how life is going to end up, or how our challenges are going to, what the outcome of our challenges will be. And it comes through relationship. So Moses had a relationship with God. The children of Israel only saw the hand of God and saw what God did. But Moses had an inside relationship with God where he understood why God done what God did. Amen. All right. So here's the thing. The people got to see it, and Moses had a relationship. We need a relationship with God so we can see things the way God sees them. And there's a difference between knowledge and there's a difference between perspective. The people had a knowledge of what God could do. Moses had it from a different perspective. So there's a difference between knowing a thing and having a perspective of the things that you know. What is knowledge then? Knowledge is knowing what God has said and what God has done. Perspective, on the other hand, is understanding why God said it and why God did it. And sometimes we go through challenges in our life and we just see the challenge and we don't sometimes understand why it happened, because sometimes God's not give you the answer, and sometimes we don't know why God said what He said to us. Sometimes God is going to tell us something and we don't sometimes understand why He said that. In other words, God can show us what is if we will allow Him to. I believe that to be true. God will show us what is if we just would allow him to. In St. John 10:10, this is what Jesus says. He says that he can show us how to live life the way it should be lived if we want him to. I can show you how to live life the way it should be lived. He said, I come that you may have life and that you may have it more abundantly. Also, now there's a better way to live and a better way to life that we may be experiencing right now. We just have to see it from God's view and then invite God into our lives so that he can show us how to have it. That is so key is that we can experience a better life. The thing is that we have to invite the Lord in so that he can show us that life that he, from his viewpoint, have for us. Because you may be going through something right now, and right now you don't see a better way out, you don't see a way out, you don't see a better avenue. But from God's perspective, there's always a way out. He always causes us to be delivered. Closing today, let's look at 4 benefits for learning to see some things from God's perspective. 4 things we want to look at to benefit from learning from God's perspective. Number 1, we have to love God more. When we learn God's perspective, it causes us to love God more. 2, benefit number 2 is that it helps us when we look at it from God's perspective, it helps us to resist temptation. And number 3, when we look at it from God's perspective, it helps us to handle the trials. And finally, we learn that there's protection from error when we see it from God's perspective. So let's look at this real quick. Number 1, it causes us to love God more. The better we understand the nature and the ways of God, the more we're going to love him. When you know someone, you appreciate them and you're able to love them more and to trust them more. And in Ephesians 3:18, Paul prayed that we will be able to understand how long, how wide, how deep, and how high God's love really is for us. Number 2, it helps us to resist temptation. When we look at a situation from God's viewpoint, we realize the long-term consequences of sin are greater than any short-term pleasure. Sin might bring. There's a way that seemed right to man, Proverbs 14:12 says. So when we understand it from God's perspective, we can resist temptation. Because if we're not careful, we'll look at the temptation and we don't see the long-term effect of what that temptation or that sin may bring to us. And number 3, it helps us to handle trials. When we have God's perspective on life, we realize that in all things they work together for good to those that love God, according to Romans 8:28. And also in James 1:3, it tells us that the testing of our faith develops perseverance. So when we learn things from God's perspective, it helps us to handle the trials that we're going to all inevitably go through. And number 4, protection from error. Believers and God and his people, they move, then they believe each and every day that they need to be grounded in the truth. We need to be grounded in the truth. It protects us from error. So in our culture today, the problem is that it's not that it doesn't believe something, but the problem is that it believes everything. That's our problem in our culture, is that we believe everything. And the solution to that is purpose. So today we hope that we have brought some things out to you that will be a blessing to you. We ask you to join us here at Word of Faith Church, 6411 31st Street, here in the city of Tuscaloosa. Join us for our services every Sunday at 11 a.m. and our Bible study every Wednesday at 7 p.m. God bless you. See you next time.
For more information, visit our website at wordoffaithtuscaloosa.com.